It's now 2 minutes past 8. I don't want to ruin my timekeeping record. Oh, you can count. Okay. So the second item on the agenda this evening is 2 call-ins from Councillor Briggs, who you will recognise from such earlier scrutiny call-ins as the one we just had, but he's just now moved off the committee and into a new position to be a councillor calling in a decision rather than a councillor scrutinising a decision that's been called in, if you see what I mean. And he's been replaced by Councillor Louise Nathanson, who is another Conservative councillor from Clapham Common, so a completely fair swap. And we will also be hearing on the same topic but a separate call-in from Councillor Ainsley again. There isn't any more declarations of interest, I'm assuming, Councillor Nathanson? The rest of us don't have anything new on that. Right. So, it's the same process as before, pretty much, except we've got 2 councillors with slightly different aspects of the same subject matter, which is why we've brought them together. Again, this is a meeting in public, but not a public meeting, and unlike the last item, I've got quite a few people who have indicated beforehand that they would like to speak, and assuming there is time, those are the people that I will prioritise because they have indicated before, and it was only fair that they get an opportunity to speak. Again, it's the same process at the end. We don't have the power to reverse decisions. We've only got the powers that I'll come back to refer things back. And we're going to have to be really tight with time and have an orderly meeting because if we run out of time, everything falls. So it's up to us to keep on time and to keep focused on the technicalities of what's actually being called in. So, just to mix things up, I'll let Councillor Briggs, if that's okay, introduce his call-in, which is in the papers, and I will give him, if I can set my stopwatch, 3 minutes, please, Councillor Briggs.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to focus on the purpose of call-ins and of scrutiny generally, in the sense that it allows the administration to look at what it's doing from a slightly different angle. And so all of us, in effect, in this committee have the chance to assist the administration. And in 20 years' time, residents might even thank the committee for saving their libraries in a recognisable form. I want to say, first of all, that why the money does actually exist and that it's a matter of priority, and why it's a matter of priorities. We need to look at these changes in the context of the Council's overall spending. Okay, not just the spending priorities that Council has set for itself. Council spends £550 million a year on contracting out services. So the £4 million saving the Council is talking about and not funding libraries or not funding green spaces is a drop in the ocean set against the context of savings of £550 million a year. Okay? Now, other local authorities do this well. They keep open and run their libraries. They charge a lower council tax. We don't. The alternative budget put forward in March found savings of £10.9 million without looking very hard. If Lambeth's library overhead costs were the same as the average London borough, the council would save £2 million a year. Okay? So just like the estates that the council wants to regenerate, you have a situation with libraries and green spaces, paddling pools, for example, where underinvestment and poor management becomes an excuse for a sort of nuclear option, which is where we are now. And in judicial review terms, because the administration refuses to take into account other spending arrangements, the discretion of the council has been restricted, and it is acting unreasonably. Now, page 3 of the document, it says that the considerations have been made within the resources and time available. So, change the resources available and change the time available. Set out why all the options have not been considered. I am completely indifferent at this stage as to whether libraries are run by a staff at Community Mutual or one of the suggestions made in the Independent Library Report. The head of libraries plan to keep all 10 libraries open to staff as a charitable trust. any of those options. There's another one I'll come on to. The charitable trust plan, the head of libraries plan, was rejected on the basis that it had no business plan attached.
You've got 30 seconds.
Okay. A Freedom of Information request showed that the GLL business plan was 2 pages of A4. So why has the head of libraries not been given the opportunity to put forward a business plan so that her plans can be properly considered? There's a not-for-profit provider running libraries in Wandsworth. Let's just keep it at that for now. They've achieved a 20% reduction in costs. All staff on permanent contracts have stayed in their jobs. Okay? Yet at the bottom of page 13 it says the policy of the council is to pursue a proposal that retains the library service in-house provision. So the idea of not having an in-house library service is not even considered. Officers are not being permitted to consider the options. So why can't we consider the options? This is my question to officers and to cabinet members. Why can't we consider one of the options successfully adopted by other local authorities? Why is it the policy of the council to keep libraries run in-house? That's my first question. Now, with regards to the gyms in libraries plan, it respectfully is just daft. It's a complete mess. And public health angle, it just doesn't add up. Libraries, anyone can go to libraries from any background, any ethnicity, any income. Libraries are places of tranquility and, all sorts of activities that are provided. You can't do all that with someone grunting, pulling weights next to you. It's a matter of common sense. So this is why you should send it back for reconsideration. It's not a political weakness to amend a policy. Okay? My Conservative government got knocked back on tax credits and they'll have to come up with something more workable. It's embarrassing, but it's better than getting it wrong. Okay? This needs to go back as well. This is a duff proposal. Everyone knows it. It's trying to evade responsibility for decisions about what should be funded rather than thinking about how to properly fund stuff. And the real question that should guide the administration is, how can we manage stuff better without ruining our libraries and green spaces that have been bequeathed to us, to the people of Lambeth, not to this administration? They belong to the two more lines. I'm grateful for the extra time. So this report isn't the Culture 2020 report, it's the No Culture by 2020 report, if you don't send it back for reconsideration. If the committee believes in libraries, give libraries another chance, because at the moment we've got a set of recommendations and a set of agreements to those recommendations which are unworkable and utterly despised by the community.
Okay, can I get on with the next part of the meeting, please? Thank you very much. So, Councillor Ainsley, if you can also manage slightly better than Councillor Briggs and try and limit it to 3 minutes, that would be great. Otherwise, other people won't have the opportunity to speak or scrutinise the proposals properly. Thank you.
Okay. I joined the march to try and save our libraries the other day there, and one of the banners. I'll have no time left. One of the banners said, "In times of austerity, closing libraries is like closing hospitals in times of plague." Colleagues, I really do urge you to reconsider this decision and send it back. We've all had a flurry of emails flooding into our inboxes from residents, friends groups, people who are deeply concerned that this culture report has been rushed through at the 11th hour, not consulted on. It jeopardises the great and proud record that Lambeth libraries have. Now, I've spent some time with Friends of Libraries recently, and we have got some fantastic achievements. National recognition of the work in supporting online access for visually impaired people. Lambeth was cited in the Department of Culture and Media and Sport annual report on libraries as one of only 3 examples in the whole country of good practice. And we're asked by the Minister of State for Disabled People to submit a case for the LGA as a positive example of innovation, helping to create vibrant digital communities around public libraries. The work has also been nominated for an Accessible Britain Challenge Award, Brixton's Library Psychology Reading Group. I could go on and list all of these great things that the libraries have done. They are essential for supporting literacy development with preschoolers, and all these people, all these groups are here tonight. People with mental health issues, dementia awareness, reference information online, people that rely from employed librarians to help them submit their, increasingly as we go online, application forms for benefits, etc. You know, from pensioners to young people, it just covers a whole gambit of offerings, and we should be really proud of our libraries. My concern is if we don't send this back now, in-house, as it were, we will face many legal, expensive challenges. We will face the challenge of failure to provide a comprehensive and efficient service under the 1964 Public Libraries and Museums Act, failure to consider a viable proposal to run all 10 libraries within the required financial constraints under Draper versus Lincoln's County Court Council 2014, failure to secure best value as required by the Local Government Act in 1999, failure to comply with the Equalities Act.
That's 3 minutes, Councillor.
Well, I have several points to make. There
are 34 in your submission, so I ask you to restrict yourself.
Listen. I'm hearing from Labour members themselves that the gyms idea has now been potentially dropped because of the historic nature of our buildings and the complete unsuitability to be converted into gyms. So I would ask, has the actual idea been dropped? Because some of your colleagues, including Helen Hayes, has been sending out messages recently that it looks as though the gyms idea is dead in the water. I think the public deserve to know the answer to that as soon as possible. I've cited some of the good points about our libraries, but I've said in my calling that at this time, we should be increasing the library provision that we offer, not cutting it back.
Can I just make the point that we're now on 4 minutes 30?
Sure.
I have got a guillotine. I cannot go beyond it. So the more time you use, the less time there are for other people who have indicated they want to speak, and the less time there is for the committee to ask questions. So,
okay. Let me finish with this. I would draw your attention to the SIPFA March 2014 figures that show that of the 12 inner London boroughs, Lambeth was the 10th lowest revenue spend in many of the provisions. Now, we've got some great examples that we can build upon. Let's create some great results for Lambeth and build on that innovation, because we've got a long way to make up. And if you, with this idea of spoke libraries, the financial risks of, turning people away already in Streatham, where I am, in my ward. The library is oversubscribed. They're turning people away. They're having to go into the Mark Bennett room in order to provide studying area for our teenagers who can't get peace. Now, this is personal for me. If this was happening in Scotland, people wouldn't allow it. I'm sorry. They would not allow what is being proposed. Without a library, I would never have achieved anything near like I would have achieved in my life.
You've now had double the amount of time meant to be allotted to you.
I rest my case, my lord.
Thank you very much. Okay. We've now got... Okay. as I said, we've got several members of the public or representing other groups who have indicated they wanted to speak, which is why I was trying to stick to time, because there's only so much time I've got for the meeting. I've got, if I ask the first four to come up and sit here, if they're here. Laura Swarfield? She here? If you wouldn't mind coming and sitting in one of these seats. Colette? If you applaud everybody, you won't get through the comments. Colette Thomas? Is Colette here? Well, she's asked to speak. Hi, Colette. Patrick Roberts. I think, Patrick, we were going to bring the microphone to you, which is fine. Okay, that's fine, whatever you're most comfortable with. And as you're already here, Christina, have a seat. So, well, there are some more, but I'm going to just take this four because that's how many seats we've got, and then we'll have the others next, if you don't mind. Okay, so if you can try and stick to the subject of the call-in and restrict your remarks to 2 minutes each, please. I will let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. Just introduce yourself, and then if Christina, you could turn on the microphone for Patrick. Patrick, you could introduce yourself and give us 2 minutes on the subject at hand. Thanks very much.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, well, I'd like to thank the committee for giving me this opportunity, which is actually more than I received during the actual consultation process, to be able to talk about the work the libraries actually do. So I'll just highlight a couple of areas that I think that this committee needs to consider. The committee, the council officers stated that they applied the gun-in principle in how they conducted this consultation. And yet, I myself have, when I attended the first consultation meeting, requested further information on the financial budgetary plans of the authority. I won't go through all of that because that's already been described by the councillors previously. So, never received a response on that. Then, with respect to the actual documentation, I'm actually registered blind, and I work with other blind and partially sighted individuals, residents of Lambeth, within Streatham Library and in Tate South Lambeth Library. Again, we were not provided information in an accessible format. There's a belief within the council, with council officers, that if you put something on the website, that it is automatically accessible and a screen reader can actually read it. That is not correct. All you've done is just provided an electronic format, but in actual terms of actually trying to read it,
You've got 30 seconds.
as you would actually read a book, you can actually turn the pages back. With the document that was provided on the Lambeth website, you were unable to do that. And finally, I bring to the attention with respect to the gym proposal. The government on July the 31st ran a consultation, a new strategy for sports, and that concluded on the 2nd of October. And the questions they were asking was, why are disabled people not going to gyms, leisure centres, etc.? Why are they being discriminated? Where do they lie with regards to health and safety? So this whole plan of actually stating that you were going to try and put a gym within a library, well, I really don't know what to say. And if anyhow you guys were actually ever seriously contemplating on not sending this back, then I really have to struggle with how people actually, intelligently applied the gun-in principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina, if you could just introduce yourself. You've got 2 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left, please. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. I'm here because of libraries too, and I would suggest that everybody that I'm facing this evening, and probably a lot of people behind as well, are here because of libraries, because generations of trade unionists educated themselves through libraries. Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital in the British Library. And Carnegie became the richest man in the world, but he started poor in Dundee with a working man's library. And when he was the richest man in the world, what did he do? He gave back 3,000 libraries. And one of those libraries is our beautiful Carnegie in Herne Hill, which has served this community, as have Tate South Lambeth and Minette, all gifts from public spirited individuals. And with respect, everybody who I am facing is a temporary custodian of the historic gifts which belong to this community. It's only temporary, and that we have to safeguard that for everybody because we benefited from it, and it's not for us to pull up the ladder behind us. So I welcome the idea of being genuinely imaginative, genuinely creative, and trusting the people of Lambeth. And in particular, our visionary current head of service, Susanna Barnes, who has done an incredible job of turning around in a very short time what was, to our collective shame, known as the worst library authority in England, which is Lambeth. And if I can just say for my own library, Tate South Lambeth, our figures are up 86% on last year. That's to do with Susanna. And it is Susanna who put forward the suggestion that we should have what GLL is. GLL is a fantastically successful staff mutual spun out in the 90s in Greenwich to run their leisure centres. They now employ 8,500 people and are hungry, according to their report and accounts, to acquire new assets. We have assets that GLL are really keen to acquire, and whereas Mrs. Thatcher sold the family silver, this current cabinet wants to just give it away. I think there should be a level playing field, that the Trust, which is very successful in York, in Suffolk, Devon is following, so are others, that should be looked at, because I believe we could keep that wealth within Lambeth instead of giving it to Greenwich. And I think, just finally, I think that there should be a level there is no business plan for the GLL, so to reject the Trust on the basis there is no business plan seems a little irrational.
Okay, thank you very much. If you turn off your microphone. I'm going to go to the other end because I think Colette wants to talk about parks. I'll just carry on with Laura to talk about libraries, if that's okay.
Okay, I will not have time in 2 minutes to list all the things that are wrong with this dreadful, dreadful plan. And I will not have time in 2 minutes to list what a brilliant library service we have now. It's improved enormously over the years since Susanna took over. It provides a colossal service all over its 10 branches in all sorts of ways with activities, all sorts of free resources, and people are using libraries more than ever, which is unusual in England, but never mind. What I'm going to say is please will you refer this decision back to be properly looked at. Is there time? Yes, there is, because it's now quite clear that the GLL plan hasn't even got to the back of the envelope stage. The only thing that's fixed is that GLL gets to spend a huge sum of money basically on anything it fancies. Over £1 million in revenue and £3 million in capital. And yet you're pleading poverty when you're wrecking your library service. No way. Lambeth has all the time in the world, apparently, to let GLL start to get its act together so it can find time to support the library service that already has a well-worked-out plan to keep going as people want it to and provide a service that people actually want and need. Is there the money available ready for April 2016? Yes, there is. Apart from what I've just mentioned, there are many sums of money can be identified right there in the 2020 report that could and should go to libraries right now. We'll very happily point them out to you when there's time. Is there a need to refer this decision back? Well, I think there is. It's obviously very, very unpopular. People are not going to give up and go away. And I'll just remind you the last time the council came up with a plan as destructive as this, Labour was voted out of power when the elections came up. And when the party did a post-mortem as to why, they found out that the reason was libraries. So do be careful.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, just so we keep up the library theme, and then we'll come to Colette at the end, if that's all right with you guys. Can I ask Ruth Cashman and Marjorie Landells to swap with the other three? If that makes sense. Then we keep it. Thank you.
There are many more, but unfortunately it's quite hard to handle the sheer volume, so this is just a bit.
Okay, so if you can... Sorry, what's going on? Oh, no, fine. Right, so if we can start on the left, and if you introduce yourself and you've got 2 minutes, I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds. Thanks very much.
You ready for me to go? I'm Ruth Cashman from Lambeth Unison. I'm going to start today with a few questions from people who can't speak here today. Imagine me with a beard and you're going to kind of get the right idea. We have a question from Marlene. Would you want your child studying somewhere with no staff to help them and no staff to ensure their safety? We have a question from a widow who gave it in at Brixton Library. When my husband died, I went to the library just to be around other people. After a few weeks, I asked where to find a book. After a few months, I went to the desk and told the girl what had happened. I asked her for groups to join and places to go. I didn't buy anything. I didn't have to explain why I was there. I could have as little or as much attention as I wanted. You can't get that from a gym. You can't get that from the town hall. Where do you want people like me to go? And this last one's from Sadat. I first came to the library after moving from Kosovo. I joined the English conversation group. Me and my wife have borrowed books and studied for qualifications. They helped me find work experience, and now I work at a library, giving other people the opportunities I had. Why would you want to deny that to generations of others? I have more legal questions than I can list in this time. My colleague has handed out to you a document outlining how this report brings the council into legal jeopardy under many ways. I have a few just to put to you now. Given the Cabinet is being advised by the officers of the Council that they can only implement this recommendation to lease the buildings that the undervalue does not exceed £2 million, why have the Cabinet not received independent valuations to accompany these reports? Where is the consideration of the European Commission state aid rules? Why does this letter, obtained through FOI requests, detail meetings following, plus a business case, the close of consultation, and before the Cabinet decision on discussions between the Associate Director and Greenwich Leisure on a borough-wide cultural offer? Jane Edbrook hasn't said a lot I agree with since taking charge of the library's portfolio, but I agree with her on one thing when she says we must fight the government. She wrote to us to say, I suggest you turn your head to Westminster, which is a campaign we can get on board with. I call on the Scrutiny Committee to refer these proposals back, and I call on Jane Edbrook to withdraw the plans, stand by her word, and organise a march from Waterloo Library to Parliament under the Save Libraries banner. If you don't go on, we will defend the 10 without you.
Thank you very much. Marjorie, could you turn on your mic and introduce yourself? You've got 2 minutes.
Hello, my name's Marjorie Landells. I'm Friends of Minette Library. Tonight I want to read out a statement from our MP, Kate Hoy. I think the other 2 MPs are on our side as well, but this is a statement from Kate Hoy. The Lambeth consultation was a sham. There was no mention of libraries being turned into gyms and is a ridiculous idea. No serious consideration was given to Friends of Libraries' own ideas, nor was the proposal by library staff even considered. The whole process has been clouded in secrecy, and I have no confidence in the council being able to make any of their plans work. So the campaign to retain library provision for all those who need and want a library must continue. We owe that to those who, in the last century, unlike leaders of today, were far-sighted enough to see the importance of a library for future generations. Kate Hoy. I mean, I agree with everything she says. I mean, today we were reading that £10 million has been put aside for the Garden Bridge, down from 30 million to 10 million. That 10 million could be spent on our parks and libraries.
Absolutely clear that that money is not Lambeth's money, that's Transport for London money, so it's got nothing to do whatsoever with Lambeth, so it couldn't be transfers. So.
Actually, yeah.
Anyway, let's not get hung up on the Garden Bridge, we're here to talk about the Garden Bridge. But...
For the Garden Bridge, 3.5 million a year for 0.5 hectares of land. Myattsfield Park is 5 hectares of land and will run for 45,000 next year, not 3.5 million.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Colette Thomas. I'm the current chair of the Lambeth Parks and Green Spaces Forum. I'd like to thank Councillor Ainsley and Councillor Briggs for bringing the call in on parks. Because unlike libraries, we haven't had a lot of people marching to have their paddling pools stay open and their toilets opened. We haven't had a lot of people understand the implications of not having their green spaces looked after because of a reduced budget. We haven't had a lot of people discussing or tweeting or putting on Facebook, what about our parks, what about our open spaces, what about the green lungs in an already overpopulated and very, very environmentally unfriendly city. So what I'd like to say is that the call-in, I'm going to be really quick, the call-in is right, that it should be brought back to Cabinet and it should be very thoroughly and stringently reviewed, because there is a lot of evidence that is still not on the table at the moment. We don't know about the event strategy. We've been told that we could, in the consultation, they talked about more events to raise more income to go towards parks. That strategy hasn't actually gone through yet. So how can you have a cabinet report with proposals being passed and we don't have all the information? Maybe we might be able to have more events. Maybe some of that income generated can go back into parks. Maybe some of that income could keep toilets open. Maybe some of that income would keep paddling pools going. Maybe some of that income could keep parks open and not locked, and maybe locked on occasions, which is what has been proposed at the moment, that they won't be, many parks won't be. I'm really here this evening to say parks haven't had a look in right now, and we absolutely need people to listen, wake up. The open spaces are non-statutory. The council has done a good job, but they need to do better. These are the spaces that people are going to go to if their libraries aren't open. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your contributions. You feel free to return to your seats if you want to. Well, there might be other people that want to come and talk, so thanks very much. There was a lot there, obviously, but perhaps we can just have quick introductions, very quick, from the officers and cabinet member, and then perhaps a very quick response, but we really do need to get to committee member questions in order to do our job of scrutinising the call-in.
Alistair Johnston, Commissioner for Parks.
I'm Adrian Smith, I'm a Director for Strategy and Commissioning in Neighbourhoods.
Jane Edbrook, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods.
John Kerridge, author of the report.
Can we please have a bit of respect? We're doing...
I'm John Wiggins, Commissioner for Libraries and Schools.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm John Wiggins, Commissioner for Libraries and Schools.
So, perhaps, Councillor Edbrook, you very briefly set out a bit of the context and then we'll get on to questions.
Thank you, Chair.
As I think most of you know, we started the conversation around the reductions to the cultural services budget at the beginning of the year. Just to remind everyone, at the moment we spend just over £10.5 million on cultural services across the borough, and by 2018 we'll have just over 6.5 million. Of course, that's during the current round of the £200 million of cuts we're having to make, and does not reflect any further cuts we may hear in the autumn statement. I know that Councillor Briggs has basically rejected the premise that we have to reduce the cultural services budget by that £4 million, and says that we should take cuts from elsewhere. I think there is a fundamental question here, which actually I reject, which that actually there are areas of the council that should have further cuts and deeper cuts. I mean, the idea that 4.5 million is just a drop in the ocean that should be attributed to another budget line, I think belies the stories behind people. For example, we spend £1.5 million a year in domestic violence. An additional cut to domestic violence would be over
£500,000 on consultants.
Can you please
I want to remind people that people look at the adult services budget and say, well, just there can have even further cuts. But let's remember that physical disability package is £11,000 here.
Well, maybe if you want to continue like your noise, yeah, then we'll wait to respond, and by that time the time will be done. So the questions, the really pertinent questions that need to be answered, you won't have an opportunity for that to take place. So please, some order. Allow the cabinet member to finish.
Thank you. So I think everyone around this table understands that, well, I wish we were aware, but I didn't have to make a £4 million reduction to cultural services. I understand that we have to take that burden so that we can make sure that we protect the most vulnerable people within our society and within our council. So I think that there is a premise there which I reject, which I understand we have to do this. I wish that we didn't have to, and I think that I'd very much hope that there would be a change in government and may not have to address this. I would want to say a little bit kind of wider in terms of why we've taken the strategy we have across the three areas. So when we have to make reductions to our budget, there are three things that we can do. We can look at reducing the level of service, we can do less, but we can try and do it well, or we can try and promote our income. And I think it's been a really difficult mix across the whole of cultural services because there isn't quite a mix. In parks, we are looking at a service reduction, but that's entirely right. In some areas, we'll no longer be able to keep open our paddling pools that cost up to £40,000 a year to keep open. And we're going to try and make sure that there's a paddling pool in each area and there's borough-wide coverage. It's true, some parks will no longer be able to be closed at night. And that's really difficult, and we're going to be working with the police, and the parks that we've identified that will try and stay closed at night are those because we've done it in consultation, community safety and the police. In terms of sports, we're going to have to maximise our income from some of our sports facilities, and that does mean, in the case of some of our sports pitches in our parks, that actually we'll need to charge for people to go and use it for football, and that's a difficult decision that we've had to make, saying that we'll no longer... It's just southern, a bit different. And in terms of libraries, as you all know, in the first round of cuts, we already reduced the opening hours to many of our libraries. So, for example, Waterloo is only open 31.5 hours a week. If we had just done this as a blanket cut to opening hours of all 10 of our libraries, some of our libraries would have been open as little as 15 hours a week. And, of course, our town centre libraries, Clapham, Streatham, Brixton, West Norwood, would have been open around 25 hours a week. So we made the decision that we would really focus our resources on the town centre libraries and, of course, to increase our number of town centre libraries to 5. So I think that while there'll be some conversations about the difficult decisions we've had to make, and I will ask officers particularly to come in on the equalities impact assessments and some of the concerns, I think that we need to keep on those premises of those principles that we went forward with.
Okay, so now we need to ask some questions, because that's what we're here to do, and that's what I hope people will allow us to do. Now, Councillor Ainsley has got 34 different parts to his calling, so I've taken the liberty of kind of boiling it down into what I think are the three most pertinent points, which I personally want to ask about. In his calling, he says that the consultation didn't include the proposal that subsequently came forward about the gyms in libraries, an arrangement with Greenwich Leisure. I'm interested to know how that came about, because it doesn't seem clear, and a normal consultation you would consult on the thing that ends up being the proposal. Now I understand there might be mitigating circumstances, but it doesn't seem clear to lots of people, and certainly not to Councillor Ainsley in his call-in, how that came about. And it does seem quite unusual to me that it wasn't in the original consultation when it ends up being the proposal that is put forward. So perhaps you can have a look. I'll do all three. I'll do all three. So we've got that one. The second point that I think of the 34, forgive me if they're not the most relevant, but is the EQIA elements. That is the equality impact assessment elements, because I think the figure in the papers about arts provision, and it being quite unusual that amongst art provision, more black people and BME people than white people use libraries than other art or creative and cultural services, does raise, quite serious concerns in a borough like this, which has a very large BME community, and also the point about the fact, as we heard from Patrick, among others, that disabled people, older people and younger people disproportionately use libraries more than other groups of people, and therefore it is of concern if those people who are often already disadvantaged by the very large cuts that are not the council's responsibility are being impacted on, and we need to give serious consideration to that. And the third point I think that was the most pertinent was about the alternative financial models that other speakers mentioned that came up in the consultation, not least from the Libraries and Archives Management response and their trust, and why that wasn't considered a suitable vehicle to take forward the changes. So why wasn't GLL proposal in the original consultation? Let's hear a bit more about the EQIA, BME and other protected characteristic groups, and a little bit more about why the alternative proposal from the Libraries and Archives Management wasn't considered to be an adequate response.
I'm just concerned that you've summarised my 34 points down to 3. Professional, can I put that we want professional staff in our libraries? That's all I'm asking. One more point. Thank you.
So, I don't know who wants to, if you reintroduce yourself, because we'll have forgotten who you are.
My name is John Kerridge. I'm going to try as best as possible to answer most of the questions that are being presented. And if by any chance I've forgotten any of the questions that I was writing down very quickly, can you just remind me again? Okay. First of all, in terms of why an in-house provision, that was the policy. As an officer, we provided with policy guidance. That was the policy and preferred model that the council wanted to pursue. So we followed that policy framework of maintaining the service. Okay. In terms of Greenwich Leisure Limited, GLL currently manage the borough's existing leisure facilities.
Can you please let people answer the question? Otherwise we're not going to get through it, and then we'll run out of time and all the business will fall and we'll have got nowhere. And that would be, a shame for everyone, including all of you who've come here to hear the answers. So please, can you let people answer the questions?
They have a contract with the local authority until 2022 to manage them facilities. As part of the consultation, leisure centres, all the leisure centres, Brixton Recreation Centre, Clapham Sports Centre, etc., they manage them buildings on our behalf and contracted to provide that facility. As such, they provide.
So why wasn't it in the original consultation? That's the question. Okay, can you answer?
As part of the original set of recommendations that were put forward as consultation on the 30th, which started on, I believe, on the 30th of January 2015, The proposal wasn't set out in the consultation because it wasn't an idea that we had to present. As through the consultation...
Can you please let him answer the question?
As part of the consultation process, GLL put forward the principle and idea of setting up a cultural trust within the borough. During the consultation
I'm
process,
trying to chair this meeting as best I can. If people keep interrupting, we will run out of time and the councillors won't get their call in heard, and that will be the end of it. Okay? We have to do it in this time frame. Please stop interrupting, otherwise we'll just have to abandon the meeting.
yeah, the proposal that came from Greenwich Leisure before the close of consultation on the 24th of April 2015 proposed the establishment of, or the exploration of a cultural trust for Lambeth that would help support and guide the council not only with existing cuts that it was dealing with, but future cuts as they came over the horizon. And we've already had an announcement of future cuts of 30% from central government and local government finance. As part of that proposal, GLL put forward the idea that assets could be used differently. So the buildings could be used differently in terms of using them buildings to generate income, which then would counter and mitigate against the cuts that would hit the services of providing in them buildings. At no stage was GLL invited, no stage has GLL expressed an interest in managing the library service, given they know what the policy of the council is, that we're pursuing an in-house provision. So it came through the consultation. We then, when consultation closed, there was two substantive proposals that came in. One of them was from Susanna Barnes, who everybody around this table would agree is a fantastic officer and servant to the borough. Came from Susanna, I believe on the 24th of April. The second proposal was from GLL. We sat down and looked at them both. The first thing is that the GLL proposal was for management of buildings. It was not for delivering the library service. The second thing is that the proposal from Susanna was for management of the library service. So we assessed them differently. Neither one was rejected. And both of them, up until this week, I've had correspondence with Susanna on her proposal. If Susanna comes forward with proposals that are worked up and funded, the council will consider them. The problem and the core problem, and I offer this as absolutely no criticism of Susanna whatsoever, the current proposal that Susanna has set out has income sources that are not available. They are not available based on the decisions that were taken on the 12th of October. There was something short of around about £700,000 of unsecured income against the proposal. That does not mean that the proposal's bad. It just needs more work. The timeline that's set is that the budget in cultural services starts to diminish on the 1st of April 2016. The GLL proposal has currently as it is, has been assessed. It is on hold pending the outcome of the scrutiny committee. The technical team is ready to start and do the technical work, which we hope we will have up and running very quickly and turn around very quickly between now and January 2016.
I'm going to come back to the equalities point, but I'm going to let, if anyone else has got any points that are relevant to Councillor Wilson, please. Sorry, we will be coming back to other points and there will be other questions, so if we can just proceed without being interrupted, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
So I'll try and keep this quick in recognition of time. Councillor Briggs made a mention of not having in-house provision, essentially privatising library services. I would just like an answer as to why we didn't consider privatising our libraries, bearing in mind what Councillor Briggs has said about having professional staff. Thank you.
We felt very, I think, especially in light that we just brought Lambeth Living in-house, I think we felt very strongly as an administration in terms of our values that where we can, we should try and keep our services in-house, not least because it protects the rights of our employees, but also because it makes sure that we still have continuing responsibility and direct accountability back to our residents.
Thanks very much. Councillor Wellbelow.
Councillor Briggs talked about changing the time available to make this decision, insinuating that there was no impact should you not take the decision now. How practical would this be, and what would be the impact on our 5 town centre libraries which are being retained, and leisure services more generally?
Sure. I mean, in a sense, as we advised Cabinet when they were presented with the recommendations, the Council is duty bound by law to set a balanced budget. Decisions around our 3-year budget plan were set over a year ago. There is an expectation, in fact, it is a requirement by law that the budget balance is therefore. So come 1st of April, the budget, the business units where this money sits will be stripped, assuming that the decisions are made on where to allocate that. So we don't have the flexibility that, say, national government would have to borrow or to set unbalanced budgets and draw sources from elsewhere. So we have to set that budget over a medium term.
And I just want to, just following up on that point, again, if we were to make our budget cuts, that we'd have to go into our reserves, and actually Lambeth already has one of the lowest level reserves in the whole of London. And if we were to just have to go blanket cuts rather than do the system redesign, as I mentioned, our town centre libraries would be reduced to around 25 hours of open.
Please. Right. Councillor Nathanson.
Thank you. Can I ask just the clarity on that point? You say you need a balanced budget, and I understand that, but have the cuts to each individual department already been set, or is there flex within that for us to look at this and say, obviously there is a lot of opposition to cuts to culture, therefore we need to find these cuts from other places?
We set the overall budget, and in fact, I want to say last year, as you know, that was agreed not only by Cabinet but by full Council, and I believe that Councillor Briggs was actually at that meeting where we set the overall budget. The envelope that has been already set within cultural services is 6.5 million, and that has been agreed, and that is not something that could go back at this stage in terms of what's available to us within cultural services. What we went out to consult with for 3 months was what do we do with that 6.5 million, and again we've already said that covers our parks, it covers our libraries, it covers our leisure centres and our community sports, as well as the fact that we do very little anymore in terms of culture and arts. So I mean, what we've got before us is how we spend that 6.5 million.
Councillor Dyer, did you? Councillor Parr? Councillor.
I just wanted to ask just a little question about clarity about these 2 main proposals on the table. And so you've got the GLL management of the buildings, and then you've got Susanna's proposal, which is management of the library service. Yeah? So are those 2 separate and far apart, or is there not some alignment to be had between the 2? And what work are you doing to support the development of the Susanna proposal? What? To support that? I'm not understanding.
Okay. I think Councillor Wilson's got something related to that as well, so take that at the same time.
Sorry, it's to follow on with that in terms of there only being 2 proposals on the table. It seems to me, from having read this, that there might well have been other organisations who thought this was only about the library service, and it seems as though these organisations are talking about the buildings and keeping them going. So I'd like some clarity on whether or not people were aware of what the distinction was, because it doesn't seem to be just about the library service. We are talking about facilities and options to do stuff in buildings.
In terms of the library buildings, what we're talking about is that we have 10 library buildings within the borough. It's 3 of the smaller libraries that we're talking about becomes part of the GLL contract, and they take over management and bring in alternative activities which then would generate income to supplement the loss in money that falls out on the 1st of April. As set out in the consultation report, the original plan was to remove the revenue funding from all them smaller libraries. This proposal keeps them open, keeps the buildings open.
Please. We're going to run out of time. We'll run out of time.
Okay. The situation is that the original proposals that we consulted on the 30th, starting the 30th of January up until the 24th of April in the consultation document, committed the council to, because of the budget situation, to taking all revenue out of the neighbourhood, what we call neighbourhood libraries, and using whatever revenue we had to bolster the town centre provision, where I think, off the top of my head, about 60 to 70% of users access the library service. Okay. The strategy that then evolved from the consultation process was that JLL came forward with a proposal which helped us to keep the buildings open. Without that proposal, there is no other proposal to put revenue back in to the budget. So we enter a situation on the 1st of April 2016 with a network of smaller libraries treasured by local communities which will not have a base budget to keep them open. We reverted back to that strategy. In terms of the situation, in terms of linking up the service with GLL, again, the proposal that Susanna has put forward and the proposals that GLL have put forward, I do not think are a million miles apart and can cross over and complement one another. They can do that. The problem that we are facing, one, is there's no more money, and two, is that we've come to the end of consultation. We're in the process of putting recommendations to council. Council is figuring them out if it wants to agree or not agree to them, or we have calling. We need a period, probably from the end of today, subject to the outcome of the meeting today, up until January, to bring the parties together to work in more detail.
Okay, Councillor Park.
So, why did we take the report and amend it to say that instead of making it clear that you're only going to go down one particular course and rejecting the alternative proposal, let's put something in there that says we have to make the savings, they have to be made by April because the money is being taken away from us. But within that envelope, that financial envelope, there may be more than one option of how to achieve that. And if you can come up with the details using elements of Susanna's plan, then we will do so.
I now have to ask the committee for an extension to continue the meeting. Thank you. To 9:30. I'm not allowed to go beyond that, so I really, really need people to focus on short answers and not interrupting, otherwise we won't get through.
Can I just say that I think that's what the report does say, because in a sense you have to make the distinction between the service that we can fund, which is the kind of library service, where that takes place, separate that to one side for the moment. The core library service that we can fund is the service that is seeing the £800,000 reduction. And what Susanna's put forward is a proposal about how you would use that resource differently. Now, the original proposal we didn't assess as being viable because it relied on the use of all sorts of income which weren't available in the timescale. And clearly what we as officers have to recommend to Cabinet is a proposal that will meet the financial and fiduciary duties. So in other words, a plan that says 1st of April we can offer assurance the money will drop out. So if you take what the report says, it says we are offering up mitigations about how we'll use those buildings that would otherwise have been empty, because we wouldn't be able to have any revenue to run a service in them, but that we, and the report sets out, we would continue to work with the head of libraries and archives, the management proposal. The report says very clearly it was not rejected, but the organisation's experience on what it takes to spin out and create a staff mutual is the lead-in time for an organisation we did a couple of years ago, which had about 5 or 6 people in it, took 18 months to 2 years. Now clearly, with a financial deadline that I'm afraid I don't agree we can negotiate on the 1st April. We don't have the lead-in time to create a staff mutual that would deal with a budget of in excess of £1.something million. We're talking about 80 plus members of staff. So what we said in the assessment was things like the consideration about pensions, about liabilities, about IT, about infrastructure, all of these things for a staff mutual spin-out take a huge amount of time in order to work through. So that's why we didn't reject the proposal, but we said that we would continue to pursue a policy where the buildings remain open, they remain in our ownership, although we may lease them to GLL under licence. We would then be able...
Please stop interrupting, otherwise we're going to have to
continue
move
to pursue the staff mutual model to see at which point it could be taken forward. So I think the report does already address the issue that you've raised, but hopefully we've also set out why it was that we felt we were unable to accept it at this stage, and why we felt that it couldn't cover all 10 sites.
Yeah.
Councillor Parr.
So maybe there should be a break clause after a time that is long enough to work up the staff mutual proposals.
Okay.
I think what we're saying is we think we have put in for a break clause until 2022, so it does allow us, give us some time to look into that. I also want to be clear that the leases to the 2 proposed buildings, and as we know, we're about to go into, subject to this meeting, the future of Tate South, Lambeth and Durney are still subject to an additional 4-week consultation. So if we are just talking about, for example, the proposals around Minette and Carnegie, that is actually, it's not a 25-year lease, it's a proposed 7-year lease with shorter break clauses. So actually, if new models come forward, and I want to remind everyone that Cabinet councillors from Herne Hill particularly made sure that there was an agreement to continue to work with the Carnegie Community Trust, who have long been on a journey to try and make Carnegie into a community hub. And there was the acknowledgement that they may not be ready just yet to take on Carnegie, but we do not want to stop those journeys that have been taking place. We know that up in Lloyd George Library, we're a little bit ahead of Carnegie and are now in a position on the 1st of April, they'll be running our first ever independent library. And so I think we've just got to say that we are not ruling out the emerging of these models, and from a perspective in terms of Vassal and Minette, we've spoken to the proposal on Minette and said this does not necessarily roll out. What it does say is we will not be selling these buildings so we can continue on this journey. Remember, in the first round of consultation, we suggested selling Minette. So actually, the fact that we are keeping this and we're making sure it's still open to the public means that we can still continue to work with residents about these evolving models. And in some ways, we've moved from where we were a few years ago, where actually no one wanted to countenance any of these models, to actually a point where lots of residents are now stepping up and going, we see that change has got to happen, and we're ready to get on board and talk about what can happen in these buildings.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nathanson, please.
Thank you. While I understand a lot of the conversations that have been going on about the need to balance the budget, and although I have my own personal feelings about blaming central government cuts as a little bit lazy, I don't think money should be the only consideration in your thinking here. So the original proposals that were consulted, and as you say, are now defunct because the options that are being taken forward are ones that were put forward within that consultation period. So do we have time for a second consultation period on the GLL proposal that was put forward in addition to Susanna's proposal, with help from officers from the council to ensure that her proposal is properly worked up and properly costed so that there can be a genuine choice on the table?
Can I just quickly make the point that I don't think contextualising what's happening here in the context of central government cuts is lazy. Lambeth Council, we've lost 56% of our budget from central government. Including income. And never including income. And we've just heard. However, please answer the question about the possibility of a second consultation.
We've started the last 3-month consultation in January at the beginning of this year. We are now in November. Again, I'd remind colleagues that the budget falls out on the 1st of April. So I think you can see that after a 3-month public consultation, then reading through all of the consultation responses and listening to alternative ideas and exploring them, that has taken us 11 months. I think you guys can do the maths in terms of whether or not I will be able to deliver a balanced budget by the 1st of April. What I will not rule out, of course, is continuing these conversations with around the alternative ideas on a staff trust. And again, we will be doing a 4-week consultation about the future of Tate South Lambeth and Derning, and during that we will welcome alternative proposals. We will continue to work with residents about what activities could happen in these buildings, and we will, as we have already publicly said, we will work with them in terms of what those emerging business plans are.
Can I return to one of the original points about equalities? Well, obviously we have a very diverse borough. We've got a very large BME population which disproportionately uses libraries more than the white population, and then people with protected characteristics and disabilities, as Patrick raised, among other people, are very dependent on our library service and various aspects of it. Young people, children, I know, I've got some of my own that use libraries, and older people, very dependent on libraries. It does say in the report that we couldn't mitigate out everything that's going to happen, but I would like to hear more about what mitigation we can take and ongoing work to address those things.
As is said within the Equalities Impact Assessment, you cannot take, which effectively is 30 to 40% budget out of the service and it not having an impact. It's just fallacy to think that you can do that. It does have an impact. What the council needs to do is understand that impact and try at best when dealing with that to counter and put mitigations in place to do that. And let me talk about some of the mitigations, which are not perfect, but in the scheme of the resources, we understand the impact, and under the Equalities Act, we try to address them.
I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through all of them. I'm glad that we have them, and I think it may be something that we want you to come back with more on, pending what we say in a minute. Councillor Adelaide.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the equalities impact, it's obviously important that going forwards our libraries are able to offer the services and activities they're currently able to. In the report that was approved by Cabinet, there was a mention of £200,000 per annum in funds that could be used to help support the continuation of those activities. Could we get a bit more detail about the shape those funds will take and how they could be used in some of those cases?
That's part of the mitigations I was going to talk about. The first thing is that in mitigating the fact that there will be reduced, if you like, footprint for library services within 3-4 of the buildings, that we're providing £100,000 to Susanna's team to curate and facilitate activities within them spaces every year as core of the budget. The second thing we're doing is slowly working with the London Community Foundation, which is referenced within the calling, to establish by 2019 a £10 million endowment fund. Now, part of that fund will already be up and running this financial year because the London Community Foundation are putting £3.5 million into the endowment, which will release revenue. That revenue for the first 2 to 3 years will be targeted to support parent and toddler reading groups, the love of reading, support grant aid to friends of groups, to provide grants to the friends of library groups if they so wish to bid in for some grant funding to do activities. Again, the situation is these are mitigations against a 30% budget cut.
Councillor Wilson. Oh, hang on, it's about libraries, Councillor Dyer. Okay, one more from Councillor Dyer on libraries, and then Councillor Wilson on top.
I remember at the Cabinet meeting that Jim Dixon's amendment was about ensuring that the library component was at the centre of any developments with GLL. As it's written in the resolve bit here, it doesn't actually give that central component. It says about working in partnership with local people, That is not what the emphasis was. So in part with that question, I want to understand what the kind of target audience will be of GLL, because that seems to be quite different from the target audience of what the library component is doing. that change in market, in a sense, is quite a significant loss that we're not really addressing here, and that needs to be addressed, because that would also help to address the whole equalities aspect, and I don't see no consideration of that.
I think one of the things you're entirely right. If you one of the things that we never get spoken about is that we also agreed to draft sports and wellbeing and activity strategy at the same time at Cabinet, and what that did was identify key target groups in terms of wellbeing. So it stops saying around our sports and activities, who is our target audience? You're entirely right. And it said specifically, it said women, BME groups, and elderly and young people. So what it starts to say in terms of that target audience, understanding that we are not in the business in terms of trying to compete with the, in terms of our GLL offer, in terms of competing with the Virgin Active. The reason we have an in-house council offer around wellbeing and leisure centres is because we want to target it towards our most vulnerable residents, the ones who need it. And the other thing that's worth saying, that you're entirely right, that we will try to push to make sure that we maximise the library at the heart of these healthy living centres within the parameters of how to balance the budget. And those are sort of the next conversations we need to have, which is how much can we push that while still having a cost-neutral offer. And I think Adrian will come in on some of those target groups as well.
I've only got 15 minutes left.
Rubbish.
Councillor Wilson's got one on parks, and then we have to move on.
Thank you very much, Chair. We've been here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and only Colette's managed to mention parks. I think we should take the opportunity to talk about that as a councillor in a ward with quite a significant park in it. I have a concern on page 14 in response to Councillor Briggs' call-in, which is in the Priority 2 Great Outdoors section. It talks about the aim of the plan is to increase income and reduce annual maintenance costs over the next 5 years. And my issue follows on into the next paragraph, where you talk about the only way to increase funding is to reduce budgets and other areas of cultural services, i.e. the library. Now, evidently, as we've seen from the audience and other members who've spoken to us in the past, that's not something that's going to be very popular. My worry is that our parks are going to have a very cut grass, that's it function, and that is going to be terrible for one of our great community assets that a vast number of people use every day. And I would like some assurances in terms of what it is that we don't get overwhelmed by dealing with the library issues, that we forget about protecting our park assets.
Right. I have to be really concise now, please.
Do you want to just talk about, you want us to focus then on what the sort of offer will be in our parks, and you want us to touch on income?
I want some assurances about the protection for adequate maintenance of our parks, because that hasn't been discussed.
All right, thanks. In preparing the specification description of the service that appears in the 2020 report, we did extensive market testing. We spoke to a number of providers, landscape providers, grounds maintenance, and other local authorities to make sure we had the description costed accurately. So the services that appear within the report we know can be delivered and those costs are accurate, current and relevant. But what it describes as a basic level of service, it is those things that you've mentioned in defined parks, as collecting the litter, cutting the grass, looking after the children's play facilities. And without those basics, they cease to become parks. So we know that that's what we can deliver within the budget we have. But you're right, there is another aspect, which is income. The events income, I'm not going to talk about, the events policy, I'm not going to talk about how it relates to parks because the council have yet to consider that. And at this point, income like that is unstable to a degree, depending on how many events you have during the course of the year and basing services upon that. So although we have a basic level of service at the moment, and there is scope to increase that, it will very much depend on the success of the events policy.
Can I add one additional thing, is that in addition to the revenue budget that we made available for parks, we also made reference to the provision of the capital investment across all of our parks and open spaces, and there's a very clear focus within that to invest in new public realm, new facilities in those parks, which replaces old and out-of-date materials that need or have high repair and maintenance costs. So it's an investment model, if you like, which is, again, for the first time we're trying to get onto the front foot in that in some of our parks, rather than always being reactive with our higher maintenance costs.
Okay, I'm going to now ask Councillors Ainsley and Briggs in 3 minutes each to tell us if... Sorry? Oh, I beg your pardon. 2 minutes each. To indicate if they consider the reasons for their call-ins to have been addressed. I'll start with Councillor Ainsley. You've got 2 minutes. I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you very much.
No. Okay, I've just heard from Ciara Estelle, who's the head of library services for the whole of England. They've been working on a mutual endeavour for the last since last April. For them, it's taken 18 months, but it can be done more quickly because of the models already set in Suffolk, York, Notts, and Dudley. So there are. Please don't clap, so I run out of time. You didn't. All summer you got a proposal from Susanna and it sat doing nothing. You obfuscated, you changed all sorts of. I've got evidence to suggest that you've deliberately delayed that that plan, and that will be subject to a review, hopefully. No, in short, my questions haven't been asked, and I mean, I've got so much. Look, we've just had another scrutiny meeting where Councillor Bennett is going to blow £500,000 on something that might be challenged legally. I mean, yet you haven't got money for our libraries. What's going on? You know, I don't know where to begin. It's just, you know, we're talking about blimmin' peanuts here. And you've not consulted with the residents and friends group who are coming up with innovative ideas to bring money in for the libraries, yet you're not very well listening to them. I don't think any of the political goings on between the Tories and Labour over this equalities impact assessment and the cuts and whose fault it is, we're sick of it. Okay, it was absolutely sick of it. There is money to go around. It's been shown in this document somewhere before. You can probably help me with that, Laura. The money is there. It's just been diverted away from the most vulnerable, when that's exactly where we should be diverting it. Kate Howie is right. It was the consultation was a sham. You're not seriously listening to any of these groups. The letters from constituents, Ruth, was absolutely heart-rendering, and I really do encourage my colleagues to send this decision back, please. For goodness sake. As someone absolutely Briggs, we are custodians. It's not time to
Councillor Briggs, thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, I've spoken to officers. I've had briefings with officers. I'm very grateful for the work that they've done. I think it's difficult for them because the priorities for spending are set higher up in the cabinet. In some ways it's difficult for Councillor Edward because the priorities for spending are set by the cabinet. And this is a council that has consistently sat on its haunches in terms of bringing in income and addressing the realities of local government reductions in funding over a course of the last 5 years. It still thinks of itself as a provider of services rather than a procurer of services, and that's part of the problem. I have to say I'm concerned by what I've heard with regards to the head of libraries plan, and I'm also concerned by the fact that bringing in a not-for-profit provider to run libraries as an option has not even been considered on the basis of, oh, these are our values. Well, where are your values when libraries are being shut? You know, it's completely hopeless to talk about values as if that is some sort of insurance against the fact that you're not running stuff very well. So I didn't mean to get political. I don't want to get political because I want to persuade these Labour colleagues to send this back. That it's in the interest of them and everyone else to send it back for reconsideration. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and I hope you agree with that at the very least, that should hopefully provide an incentive for you to send it back. So I ask you to send it back. Let them have another think about it. They can take into consideration everything that everyone has said and come up with something perhaps which is a better compromise.
committee to decide which of the 3 courses of action we can take. Number 1, can I read out what I need to read out, please? Right, so number 1, to resolve not to refer the decision back to Cabinet. That means to decide that no further action is necessary, in which case the decision will be implemented. Or 2, to resolve not to refer the decision back to Cabinet, but nonetheless to make such recommendations to Cabinet as we see fit. Or number 3, to resolve to refer the decision to Cabinet for reconsideration with a written explanation setting out the nature of the committee's concerns. I'm going to use my privilege as chair to start with what I think. I'm going to opt for option number 2 personally, and my comments are that I want to hear a lot more about what we can do to mitigate and adapt the decision to ensure that it provides as best as possible for people with protected characteristics, given the nature of this borough, particularly BME people, disabled people, older and younger people. I also would like to see more development work with the libraries and management staff on working up their proposal around the trust, as we've already heard indicated, but I think that's really important that that's taken forward. And any support from Kira Estelle or any other outside experts on other similar models should be looked at with some urgency. I will go to Councillor Parr for his thought.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go for option 3. I'd like to say with some very specific requests to things to be added into the report. First of all, to look at the alternative proposal urgently, and to look at the possibility of earlier break clauses in any agreements with GLL, so that should a viable alternative approach be agreed, it would be possible at a relatively early date to move over to a mutual model. Secondly, I wanted to ask a question, and I never got the chance, so I'm going to sort of say it now, that I was concerned about the number of access points for internet access, which was raised by Councillor Ainsley. Very important in view of universal benefit, access to choice-based lettings, etc., etc. The answer simply doesn't answer the question about whether the number of access points is going to go up or down. I would like to see something in the report that guarantees the same or increased number of internet access points with support available for residents. That's it, thanks.
I agree with option 3. I think there is enough of a window between now and April to work very rigorously and robustly. But can I finish? Work very rigorously and robustly with those alternative models, including Susanna, to work up something which is much more reflective of what the community is asking for and meeting the needs as identified in this discussion today. And I feel rather uncomfortable around GLL taking what seems to be the lead in this, although I understand the financial implications around it, but I think that we need to be a bit more robust about getting a balance if that's the model that we're going forward with.
Option 2. I do have some comments. Mine has to do with parks. I would seek and recommend assurances around the maintenance contracts. You've made them. We've talked about income that might materialise at some point in the future. I have concerns, particularly what maybe my colleague said earlier about this going back, and actually we protect the money that is going into our parks as far as possible. They are assets that should be valued.
Chowdhury.
I'm going with option 2. But my main question is around the use of the buildings and having further consideration about the health and well-being and the gym element to it. I'd like a bit more detail on how that's going to be worked out. I come from a public health background, and I do believe in health and well-being, and I do believe I would like to see that worked out. Thank you.
Councillor Wellbeloved.
Option 2, agreeing with Andrew Wilson's points.
Councillor Trepath.
Obviously, I didn't really get a chance to ask many questions given our opposition members' timings. And obviously, a lot of the residents, there's a lot of difficult debate between the maintaining of a service versus the maintaining of a building. I too am concerned that we don't want to end up in April with having to close those buildings without the option of keeping services whoever they're run by. I'm going to go with option 3.
Are we going for option 2? You can shout as much as you like. Because unfortunately, due to repeated interruptions tonight, we've not had any chance to discuss the equalities. That can take into account the impacts to be further explored. Because unfortunately, some members of the audience said that we couldn't do that tonight.
Councillor Nathan. I'm nearly out of time.
Okay, I will be going for option 3. A lot of my comments have been raised before, but I think I would say that for me it really is a matter of principle. During the Second World War, Churchill was asked to cut the arts budget, and his response was then, what would we be fighting for? Our libraries and our it's important to have the number of holes that have been raised with this consultation process and with this report, not to send it back.
Okay, so obviously that was a range of opinions, but 5 of the committee opted for option 2, 4 of the committee for option 3. So the option that the committee, a majority of the committee, and the one that goes forward is option 2. Hello. So there are a number of conditions, including, we will record them. I'm nearly out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. Including all of the ones by those councillors who opted for option 3, and we will make sure that the cabinet and the officers consider all of the comments and conditions that all of the members of the committees made. And as Councillor Edbrook and others said, this isn't the end of the whole process. There are various other means to pleasing ideas and to work with the council to take forward the new model. I now have to close the meeting. Thank you very much.